Right now, as you watch this video, there are at least 2,500 American troops deployed across Iraq and Syria, spread across more than 20 bases, and in the past 90 days alone, over 160 separate attacks have been recorded against them, according to the Pentagon and Reuters. Not a war declaration, not a full-scale invasion, but something far more dangerous: pressure. At 2:17 a.m. on January 28, 2024, a one-way drone crossed into a U.S. outpost in northeastern Jordan, Tower 22. It was small, cheap, quiet. It killed 3 American soldiers and injured over 40 others, confirmed by U.S. Central Command. And then, silence. No immediate escalation, no sweeping retaliation, just statements, carefully worded, measured. But here is what almost no one is saying. That drone was not the story. It was the signal. Because across Iraq, from Ain al-Assad Air Base to facilities near Erbil International Airport, something has been quietly building. Rockets, drones, surveillance, coordination. Not random, not spontaneous, systematic. This is not about destroying bases. It is about redefining what it means to be inside one. And once you see the pattern, the dates, the targets, the response gaps, you realize something deeply uncomfortable. This is already working, and the next phase has already begun. Here is the thesis you need to understand before anything else. The United States is not losing control in Iraq because militias are stronger. It is losing control because deterrence no longer functions inside a system designed to absorb punishment without escalating. That is the shift, invisible, but decisive, because what you are watching is not a failure of firepower. It is a failure of response logic, a system where attacks can happen, casualties can occur, and yet the threshold for full retaliation is never crossed, not by accident, but by design. In the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly how this system was built, how these militias are coordinating across borders with precision, and why U.S. bases, despite being some of the most fortified positions on Earth, are becoming strategically exposed. We are also going to break down the 2 paths ahead, one where this stabilizes under pressure, and one where this slowly spirals into something far more dangerous, without ever officially becoming a war. And you need to be here for this, because the next 72 hours of this story are going to move fast, and the difference between understanding it early and reacting late is everything. So if you have not already, subscribe, turn on notifications, because this is not the kind of story you can afford to be 48 hours behind on. Let us go back to October 17th, 2023, 6:42 p.m. local time, Ain al-Assad Air Base, western Iraq. The sun was already dropping behind the desert horizon. The air was still, dry, familiar. Inside the base, routine had taken over. Maintenance crews moving between hangars, surveillance operators scanning empty grids, mess halls serving dinner. Nothing unusual, no alarms, no incoming alerts, no urgency. For months, this had become normal, a low-intensity environment where the threat existed, but rarely crossed the line into consequence. Then the first impact hit, a short-range rocket, followed by another, then another. Sirens cut through the silence. Personnel moved, quickly, trained, rehearsed. But here is what matters. This was not the first attack, and it would not be the last. According to Reuters and the Pentagon, between October 17th and December 15th, 2023, U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria were targeted at least 78 times. By February 2024, that number had crossed 160 confirmed attacks, reported by CNN and Al Jazeera. Stop. Read that again. 160 attacks in less than 4 months. Now add the cost layer. Each Patriot missile interceptor used to defend these bases costs approximately $3 million per launch, according to the U.S. Department of Defense. The drones being used to trigger those defenses, sometimes as cheap as $20,000 to $50,000, reported by the New York Times. One side absorbs cost, the other side multiplies it. This is not just a base. It is the circulatory system of U.S. military presence in the region, logistics, intelligence, air power, all flowing through it. And something else had been stacking quietly for years: militia networks expanding, Iranian advisory structures deepening, supply routes hardening across borders into Syria. Dry timber had been stacking, and on that evening in October as it caught, engines off, weapons loaded, waiting. Revelation number 1. This is not a series of attacks. This is a calibrated military system designed to exhaust the most advanced military in the world without ever triggering a full-scale war. Start with the numbers. By March 2024, U.S. officials confirmed over 170 attacks on American positions in Iraq and Syria, according to Reuters, BBC, and the Pentagon press briefings. These were not just rockets. They included one-way attack drones, ballistic projectiles, and coordinated multi-vector strikes. Now look at the asymmetry. A single Shahed-type drone, or its locally modified equivalent, can cost as little as $20,000 to $40,000. A single Patriot interceptor missile used to shoot it down? Up to $3 million. Dollar for dollar, $40,000 is forcing a $3,000 response. Re-listen to that, and it gets worse. According to the New York Times and CNN, some of these attacks are not even designed to hit targets. They are designed to trigger defensive systems, to force the launch of interceptors, to drain inventory, to study response patterns. This is not warfare as destruction. This is warfare as calculation. Now consider the geography. U.S. bases are spread across Iraq, eastern Syria, and northern Jordan, including Ain al-Assad, facilities near Erbil, and the remote outpost at Tower 22. Each one is a node, a fixed position, predictable, observable, and the militias know this. The Pentagon has acknowledged that many of these groups operate under the umbrella of the so-called Islamic Resistance in Iraq, a coalition of Iran-aligned factions. According to Al Jazeera and BBC, these groups share intelligence, coordinate timing, and adjust tactics in real time. Credentials matter here. General Michael Eric Kurilla, commander of U.S. Central Command, the man responsible for the entire Middle East theater, stated in a February 2024 briefing that these attacks are increasingly sophisticated and coordinated. His words, not mine, and yet the bases remain fixed, exposed, operational. That is revelation number 1, and we are just getting started. Revelation number 2, and this is the part the mainstream media is getting wrong. Before the strike, the base was quiet. Fluorescent lights humming inside prefabricated housing units, coffee machines still warm from the night shift, phones charging on metal desks, a calendar on the wall still open to January 2024. At Tower 22, near the Jordan-Syria border, the soldiers stationed there were not in combat formation. They were in transition, some preparing for rest, others just beginning their rotation. Normal life, military normal. Then the drone came in, low, slow, almost invisible. It did not trigger the expected alarms in time. According to CNN and the Pentagon, it may have been misidentified as a friendly asset in the airspace, a fatal ambiguity. The explosion followed seconds later. Sergeant William Jerome Rivers, Specialist Kennedy Layden Sanders, Specialist Brianna Alexandria Moffett. 3 names, 3 lives, all under the age of 30. All serving thousands of miles from home, confirmed killed, more than 40 others injured, according to U.S. Central Command and Reuters. Let that land. Because what followed was not just grief, it was narrative. Initial statements described the strike as an escalation, measured, controlled language. But listen carefully. They said attack. They did not say breach. They said retaliation will come. They did not say deterrence has failed. That was not an accident. That was positioning. Because once you admit the system failed, once you say the perimeter is no longer secure, everything changes, politically, militarily, psychologically. And here is where the story fractures. According to the New York Times and BBC, U.S. officials quickly attributed the attack to an Iran-backed militia group. Iran denied direct involvement. Militias issued statements praising the strike without explicitly claiming it, a shadow chain of responsibility. Everyone close enough to signal power, no one close enough to absorb full consequence, and in the middle of that ambiguity, families, phone calls in the early hours of the morning, uniformed officers at the door, words that cannot be unsaid. If this is not deterrence failing, then what is it? Revelation number 3, and this one is about what is happening to the institution itself, because by the time you reach this layer, the question is no longer about drones or militias. It is about the system that is supposed to respond to them. Here is the list. October 2023. Attacks begin escalating across Iraq and Syria. October-December 2023. Over 78 attacks recorded. Reuters Pentagon. January 28, 2024. Tower 22 strike kills 3 U.S. soldiers. February 2, 2024. U.S. launches retaliatory airstrikes across Iraq and Syria. February-March 2024. Attacks resume within days. March 2024. Total attacks exceed 170 confirmed incidents ongoing. U.S. maintains troop presence at same exposed installations. Ongoing. Militias continue low-cost, high-frequency strikes. No pause, no reset, no structural change. Now look at the timing. On January 27, 2024, the day before the Tower 22 strike, U.S. officials were publicly stating that deterrence measures were holding and that escalation risks were contained, according to CNN and State Department briefings. Less than 24 hours later, 3 soldiers were dead. That is not a punchline. That is a documented fact. This is what systemic failure looks like. A loop where action is taken, but the outcome does not change. A cycle where retaliation happens, but deterrence does not return. Say that again. Retaliation is happening. Deterrence is not returning. And this is where Revelation 1 and Revelation 2 connect. The physical attacks continue because they are cheap, scalable, and deniable. The human cost continues because the system cannot stop them without triggering something larger. So it absorbs them instead. That is not how you win wars. That is how you lose them. Because institutions are not destroyed in a single moment. They are eroded, slowly, by decisions that make sense individually but fail collectively. And here is the final layer. These were not actors operating outside the system. These were decisions made inside it. These were not disloyal actors. They were loyal to the institution. And that is the thing that got them trapped inside a strategy that cannot resolve itself. Now let us talk about the strategic logic these militias, when the network behind them, are applying. Because this only looks chaotic if you are expecting a conventional war. It is not. This is closer to Beirut 1983 than it is to Iraq 2003. Back then, a single truck bomb killed 241 U.S. Marines. No invasion followed. No full war declaration. Just withdrawal. Quiet. Strategic. Decisive. The lesson was learned. You do not need to defeat a superpower. You need to make its presence feel unsustainable. That is the logic here. Each drone strike slightly increases risk. Each intercepted rocket slightly drains resources. Each contained response slightly lowers the credibility of deterrence. This is compound collapse theory in motion. Each attack makes the U.S. position more fragile. Each fragile response makes the next attack more likely. Now expand the map. Look at Iran, officially denying involvement, but benefiting from every escalation that stays below full war. Look at Israel, already stretched across multiple fronts, recalibrating its northern posture. Look at Saudi Arabia, pursuing de-escalation talks even as the region heats up. And then look at who is not reacting. European powers, NATO leadership, major global institutions. Their silence is the most eloquent statement possible, because this is not their theater anymore, or at least not one they are willing to step into. So the pressure builds, slowly, precisely, quietly, like a system being tested, not for collapse in one moment, but for endurance over time, like stress fractures in steel. The actors who might help have gone home, and the system that is being tested sits exactly where it was, undisturbed, watching. Now let us talk about what this means for you personally, because this is where the story stops being about military bases and starts being about ordinary people. Energy, that is the first transmission line. According to Goldman Sachs and the U.S. Energy Information Administration, even a 5% disruption risk in Middle Eastern supply routes can push global oil prices up by $7 to $12 per barrel within weeks. That translates directly. Fuel prices rising 8% to 15%, transport costs climbing, grocery bills increasing, quietly but consistently. That is not a forecast. That is already in your wallet. Now add shipping. The Red Sea corridor, already under pressure from regional instability, handles roughly 12% of global trade, according to Lloyd's List and the International Maritime Organization. Insurance premiums on vessels have already surged by 20% to 40% in high-risk zones. Those costs do not stay at sea. They move downstream, into retail prices, into supply chains, into your monthly expenses. And here is the unexpected layer: data, AI, infrastructure, cloud systems, data centers, According to McKinsey and Bloomberg, large-scale data centers are among the most energy-intensive systems ever built. When energy volatility increases, their operating costs spike, and those costs ripple into everything from subscription services to enterprise pricing. The digital world is not insulated from geopolitical chaos. It is downstream from it. Your electricity bill, your internet services, your job security and tech-dependent sectors, all connected. The conflict did not create that uncertainty. It just made it impossible to ignore. There is a genuine counter-argument that requires honest acknowledgement. Presenting only one side is the kind of analysis we criticize in other outlets, and this channel is not going to do that. Here is the argument. The United States is still the most powerful military force on Earth. It has conducted precision retaliatory strikes across Iraq and Syria. It has degraded militia infrastructure, and according to the Pentagon and CNN, several senior militia commanders have been successfully targeted and removed. Fair point. We report it. But here is what senior defense analysts at RAND Corporation and former CENTCOM planners understand that the surface narrative misses. Tactical success is not translating into strategic change. Yes, targets are being hit. Yes, individuals are being removed. But the attack frequency is not declining in any meaningful way. In fact, according to Reuters data through March 2024, the tempo has remained consistent or rebounding after each strike cycle. That is the gap. The system can absorb losses at the leadership level. It can regenerate capability faster than it is being degraded. So the question is not whether the U.S. can strike back. The question is whether striking back is actually changing the equation. So where does this leave us? Let me give you two clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, the managed containment. This is the version where the system stabilizes, but only under very specific conditions. First, the United States must successfully reestablish deterrence through a sequence of strikes that are not just symbolic, but structurally disruptive, targeting logistics, atomwheel channels, and cross-border coordination nodes. Second, Iran must actively restrain its aligned militias, not rhetorically, but operationally, reducing attack frequency in a measurable way over a 30 to 60-day window, confirmed by independent monitoring like Reuters and BBC tracking data. Third, regional actors like Iraq's central government must assert control, politically and militarily, over militia activity within its borders. That requires internal alignment that has historically been fragile. Fourth, back-channel diplomacy, likely involving Oman or Qatar, must create a de-escalation framework that both sides can accept without losing face. If, and only if, all four of these happen in sequence within a compressed timeline, you get a fragile equilibrium. No one wins. No one fully loses. The pressure remains, but contained. This path is possible, but here is the condition that makes it difficult. It requires coordination between actors who fundamentally benefit from non-coordination. Now consider the second path, Path 2, the slow spiral. This is not a collapse in the Hollywood sense. There are no explosions, no dramatic turning point, no single headline that says, "This is the moment everything changed." Instead, it happens like this: another drone, another interception, another measured response, another statement about restraint, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, irreversibly, like water eroding stone. Each attack normalizes the next. Each response lowers the threshold further. Each month makes the presence of U.S. forces feel less like deterrence and more like exposure. Years from now, a future generation will ask, how did they not see it coming? Because the signals are already here. Defense analysts, regional experts, even internal briefings, pointing to the same pattern. Observed, reported, not acted on at scale. I think we are closer to Path 2 than the headlines suggest, but I also thought that in early January 2024, before the Tower 22 strike happened, and then 3 deaths changed everything. Here is what I keep coming back to. That moment, 02:17 a.m. Tower 22, a small drone in a dark sky. No warning loud enough, no response fast enough, and then impact. At the time, it looked like an isolated breach, a single failure in an otherwise functioning system. But now, after everything we have walked through, the pattern of attacks, the cost asymmetry, the strategic restraint, the institutional loop, that moment looks different. It was not an exception. It was a preview. Because that outpost, remote, exposed, operating in silence, is not just a military installation. It is a fire alarm, not a political signal, not a symbolic target. A fire alarm pulled by a system that knows exactly what sustained pressure looks like and understands that no one is willing to shut it off completely. And here is the part that matters most. The system holding this entire region together, deterrence, presence, stability, was never permanently secured. It was temporarily cooperating. Say that again. It was temporarily cooperating, and now that cooperation is weakening, quietly, incrementally, without a formal declaration, because power is not just about strength, it is about response. And right now, the responses are being calculated, absorbed, and answered in ways that do not restore control. So the question becomes unavoidable. Is military dominance ever truly permanent, or is it always just one quiet, deniable signal away from becoming a liability? Share this with someone who still thinks this is just a Middle East conflict story. It is not. It is a case study in how power erodes, not through defeat but through pressure that never crosses the line. Now I want to hear from you. Question 1. For analysts and insiders, if the current tempo of attacks continues, what specific change in U.S. posture would actually restore deterrence, not symbolically, but measurably? Question 2. For the broader public, who is ultimately responsible for this situation? The militias carrying out the attacks, the states enabling them, or the decisions that allowed this system to persist? Question 3. For everyone, is stability ever truly real? Or is it always vulnerable to slow, deliberate forces that operate just below the threshold of response? If this kind of coverage matters to you, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, because these stories are moving fast, and I read every single comment, every perspective, every disagreement, every insight. This channel exists to cover the stories that are real, that have stakes, and that require more than a 90-second segment. Stay sharp.